All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be my review of Michael Jordan's docuseries The Last Dance, episodes 5 and 6, which covered the 1991-92 season and the 92-93 season. Now, of course, that's Michael Jordan at his absolute peak as an overall basketball player. He was on the other side of the mountain as an athlete. He wasn't jumping from the free throw line anymore like he was in 86 or 87 or 88. But he was stronger, he was still explosive, and he was developing his game into a great all-around game offensively. He'd stretched out his range to the three-point line. Despite what people say, he was a good three-point shooter. He just did not take a lot of those shots. So, of course, if you're 25 out of 100 for the season, you're going to shoot 25%. But if you were to take more, your average would go up. That's neither here nor there. That time period was Jordan at his absolute peak, not only as a player, but also as a quote-unquote icon. This is when his stardom started to go global. And a lot of the pressure that was surrounding that stardom started to impede his ability to move freely as a person. And I do believe that it impacted his decision-making when it came to the continuance of his career. Now, despite what many of the LeBron James fanboys in the mainstream liberal sports media are now trying to state, the media is not the reason why Jordan retired in 1993. He originally was going to retire in 91 and go to baseball. But eventually, he commiserated with his father and decided that he was going to stay to try to win a three-peat because it was something that Magic and Larry, as well as Isaiah, had never done. That was going to be his attempt to qualify himself as the greatest player ever. Please keep in mind that a three-peat had not been accomplished in the NBA since the Bill Russell Celtics when there were only 8 teams. To this day, and it's the best point that Chris Broussard has brought up in this quote-unquote LeBron versus Jordan debate, there have been only 3 three-peats since the Bill Russell era when there were only 8 teams. 2 of them were by Michael Jordan, and the other one was with a team that arguably had 2 of the top 10 greatest players of all time on it, in Shaq and Kobe, arguably. I don't have Kobe in my top 10, but he's in that area and it's definitely arguable. So once again, we're just going to cover episodes 5 and 6 of Michael Jordan's The Last Dance, which also included, of course, his quote-unquote gambling issues. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
So Shannon, how much do you believe the gambling controversy had to do with Jordan stepping away from basketball?
It might have some, but I think the biggest thing for me, Skip, is that
Let me say this before Shannon continues. The gambling to me was not a major reason. I think that what pushed Jordan over the cliff when it came to his decision to retire the first time was the ritualistic removal of his dad, who was his principal handler. His dad was not the head of the Jordan Witch Coven, his mother was, but the dad was Michael's main handler as well as programmer. And when his father was removed, that left Michael lost, and basically the only programming that he had left to fulfill was his father's command that he become a baseball player, or at least try to. So that's what prodded him into retirement, was his father's ritualistic removal.
Or since he got into the league, Skip, he was never ever normal again. And he talked about it. He was lying on the couch and he was smoking a cigar. And he said, you know, a lot of people say they want to be Michael Jordan for a day. He said, but that wouldn't be right.
Well, Shannon does not have it quite right. When Michael was laying on the couch, I believe that's when he said something along the lines of, you know, when you're ready to end a certain phase in your life. I'm paraphrasing. He said, well, that moment's here for me. I'm ready. Basically, I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to move on with my life. Now, when Michael Jordan was saying you should be Michael Jordan for a year and then see how you like it, that was in one of the cut scenes from Michael Jordan's 3rd highlight videotape. I think it was Airtime, which was a great video docu-series as well, or docu-video, basically documenting the Chicago Bulls 1991-92 season. Great video.
He says you need to be Michael Jordan for a year. And realize, Skip, we talk about this, Skip. Think about this, Skip, for just a second. What we've been going through since the middle of February, where we can't go dine, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go out and hang out. That's Michael Jordan for almost 40 years.
Thank you, sir. I give Shannon Sharpe credit, even though he says a lot of stupid shit because he's a wokity. He is an intelligent brother. He's just liberal. So because he's liberal, that offsets whatever latent intelligence that he has. He does make insightful observations, and it's very difficult for people to grasp why Jordan has become such a recluse. It's because, for all intents and purposes, he's been community property for almost 40 years. Keep in mind that he first came into national prominence in 1982 when he hit the game-winning shot against Georgetown. He first entered into true celebrity in the '84 Olympics. So that's 36 years ago and counting, that he's not been able to be a quote-unquote regular person. He talks about how back in the 1980s and 90s, he used to have to call the grocery store and they would close early for him to come over there and shop. Or how he would have to call the movie theater and go there and watch a select screening by himself, I think until he had a screening room built into his mansion. Jordan was actually an outgoing person at first, in his first few years in the league, and then it just became too much. Your personality can and will be altered based on your atmosphere, your environment around you. There's no doubt about that.
He can't go to the movies with his kids. He's never been able to be normal with his kids. He was never able to be normal. We're complaining about Skip. We've been shut down for about 2 months. Michael Jordan was shut down for almost 40 years. And it started to wear on him. But what really started to wear on Skip is that as great as he was, he says, I've had no missteps. No one says I came out and assaulted anybody, or I punched somebody in the bar, or I cursed some kid out, or I did something. I didn't do that. But what he found out, Skip, is that no matter how great you are, people will start to look for ways to try to tear you down.
Right, well, that's a part of the Heru ritual, or the hero worship ritual. They build you up to tear you down. In the same way that Horus or Heru is a symbol of rebirth. That's why they like to put prominent celebrities or athletes through that ritual of building them up, tearing them down, and then having them make the epic comeback. That's part of, the overall comedic narrative, which has become part of the American celebrity narrative. That they fall and then they're rejuvenated. So Jordan had to be put through that. And that's the reason why his father was ritualistically removed. But I'll be covering that in further depth in my 3-dimensional evaluation of the Michael Jordan story.
And that's what started to happen. Sam Smith he was an investigative reporter. I didn't know that at the time, Skip, until...
In my view, just in my view, from my perspective, Sam Smith most likely is actually an intelligence agent whose job it was to push and prod Jordan into a further level of understanding or another stage in his overall narrative development. He had to push and prod Jordan into understanding that maybe it is time for me to leave the NBA. Because that, in conjunction with what happened with his dad and what his dad actually wanted him to do, helped cement Jordan's decision to leave. So do I think that Sam Smith is just a regular columnist? No, I do not. I think that he's a bit more than that. But just my view of it.
Last night, that his background was investigative reporting. And so, Skip, when you're an investigative reporter, you start looking for things. That's normal thing that people that's writing a story, Skip, you write a story, Skip, you not try to look, okay, where did he come from? What was his parents? Did anybody do anything shady? Was he ever arrested? Did he hang with a gang? That's not what you do. You write the story, trying to tell a story, but that's not what they did. They started trying to look for things. Michael Jordan was like, man, but I tell you what, Skip, baby, not to change subjects too far, now you should have a greater appreciation for one LeBron James.
Why, sir? Why does everything always go back to LeBron James for you? It's like 6 degrees of separation from LeBron James when it comes to Shannon Sharpe. Everything goes back to fucking LeBron James. Why, sir? Please explain.
Michael Jordan grew up in an era where there was no social media.
Who gives a shit? That made the mainstream media back then even more powerful. Because athletes and celebrities and entertainers and even regular people did not have the ability to give their own version of what occurred like you have today. Social media has made things way easier on athletes. It's disempowered the mainstream media. This notion that social media has made things worse for celebrities and athletes today is a complete fabrication. It's made things way easier. Now LeBron James can go on IG or Twitter and give his take on what occurred. Back in the 80s and 90s, if a columnist had it out for you, you were finished. Even if you watch the documentary, you see that Jordan had to take Ahmad Rashad aside and say, are you ready for this interview so that I can give my take on what's actually going on? Because back then, you couldn't go to Twitter. You didn't have the Players Tribune like Derek Jeter came up with for an athlete to give his side of things. You had to depend on a media person. And if a media person had an axe to grind, they could ruin your career.
There was really no 24-hour talk shows. There was no debate shows. Everybody did not have an opinion on Michael Jordan. This is what GOAT James...
That's a lie. Everyone had an opinion on Michael Jordan back then, Shannon Sharpe, and you know that. There were many people who were Jordan detractors who would say Michael Jordan is a great individual player, but he does not have what it takes to succeed and to win because he does not make his teammates better. He's selfish and he's self-centered. I was a 9, 10-year-old kid when people were saying that, and I remember that. You're 52 years old. So back then, you were probably, what, 20, 21 years old when these things were being stated about Jordan? Maybe a little bit older than that, as a matter of fact. 22, 23 years old when these things were being stated about Jordan. So you know what was being said, Shannon Sharpe. Don't be disingenuous, brother.
Has had to deal with. He grew up in a social media era with...
Absolutely. And LeBron James has probably been the most protected athlete in the history of major American sports. We don't know anything about the dirt that LeBron James has been involved in because the media prefers to not talk about it. Do you really think that LeBron has no side babies? He's never been speeding before. He's never been caught up in any situation before involving a woman. You really believe that? Give me a break.
The constant because Skip, you saw what happened going back to that three-peat, trying to get that the pressures and how it started to wear on him. Woo! And he's like, man, look here. And David Aldridge was telling the story last night. He said, man, if y'all don't be careful, say Magic told him, y'all gonna run him out of the game. And
well, here's the thing. Once again, this narrative is something that the LeBron James fanboys have jumped on, that the media and the pressure ran Michael Jordan out of the game. If you've ever witnessed or got a chance to watch the press conference that he held when he retired for the first time, he explicitly stated, you guys are not driving me out of the game. I'm going to play baseball because this is something that my father always wanted me to do, and that's why I'm doing it. In the direct aftermath of the third championship, Jordan stated that he wanted to come back to play more. He spoke to Phil Jackson after a while when he started to consider his options, especially after his father passed away, and he asked Phil Jackson to come up with a challenge for the 93-94 season, and Phil Jackson was unable to do so. And that is when Michael Jordan said, you know what? It's time for me to try baseball. Those are the facts.
That's exactly what I believe happened, Skip. But also what wasn't in that, Skip, did you know when they were down 0-2, they were playing the Knicks in game 3. Did you know, Skip, Michael Jordan went 3 for 18 from the floor? And
Michael Jordan did go 3 for 18 from the floor in game 3. He did not shoot well. But the background to that series, Michael Jordan had a wrist injury for the latter part of the 92-93 season, and his shooting was up and down. As a matter of fact, in the series before against the Cleveland Cavaliers, there were portions of certain games in that series where he would just lay the ball up or even dunk it with his left hand because of the pressure that was on his right hand. There was even a little snippet in the docuseries where it showed Jordan at practice with his Bulls teammates, and he went and he laid the ball up, I think, with his left hand, and when he came back down from laying the ball up, he was grabbing his right wrist. That was during the 92-93 season. There was a very dirty game that was played in Detroit where Jordan had a breakaway and Dennis Rodman snatched him out of the sky and basically slammed him down to the floor, and it aggravated a wrist injury that he'd already had for the entire season. It was an issue that carried over into the 93 playoffs, and it would flare up. Against the Knicks, it happened to flare up. He started to heat up later on in that series in games 4 and 5. Fortunately for the Bulls, Scottie Pippen was consistently playing at a high level on offense throughout that 93 series against the Knicks, and that was all she wrote.
Still won that game? Now let go, James had done that. Now somebody saved Michael Jordan's legacy. Now I don't know who it was, but somebody saved that man's legacy. Skip, I liked last night. Last night was my favorite episode because Michael Jordan was very, very open. He was the most open and honest I've been. I was glad, Skip, he didn't run from the comment that Republicans buy sneakers.
That was the best part of the docuseries, that Jordan didn't run from that. Basically, he felt betrayed because that was something that he said in jest to his teammates. Jordan is known for his snappy wit. He was joking, but as people say, as is well known, there's a colloquialism that a lot of truth is said in jest. That's one of the reasons why Michael Jordan has so much appeal with so many people across the globe, because he stays out of politics, which is basically just what a bunch of people want to happen, but it's never going to happen. That's all politics is. You have to understand the commercial aspect in order to attain power. Jordan grasped that because he has the mindset of a creditor, not a debtor. The average so-called black person has the mindset of a debtor. LeBron James has the mindset of a creditor, but he tries to appease the masses who are ignorant by acting as if he has the mindset of a debtor. That's how he gains appeal politically. Jordan is not a politician. He stated that his mother asked him to take photos with, I believe it was Harvey Gantt, the Democratic politician. He said no because he does not know that dude. He decided to donate money. Now, later on in the 1990s, Jordan did co-sign the former New York Knicks player turned politician Bill Bradley. Who knows why he did that? That could have been Masonic. As we know, Bill Bradley was a Rhodes Scholar and was a teammate of Phil Jackson. So either Phil Jackson may have persuaded Jordan to support Bill Bradley, or may have given some type of trigger phrase to entice Jordan into supporting Bill Bradley. Who knows? But either way, Jordan did film a commercial to promote Bill Bradley, I think when he was running for Congress or something along those lines. But in the early 1990s, he did not support Harvey Gantt, and it was because that was in the fledgling stage of him building up his quote-unquote corporate empire. And if you were to ask me if I have a problem with that, no, I do not, because I'm totally apolitical, and I know for a fact that the vast majority of these liberal politicians, whether they're white or black, have no real intention on assisting the so-called black community. But that's neither here nor there. The point being is, just as Shannon Sharpe has stated, Jordan did not run from it.
Skip, I also believe that he said it in jest. We say a lot of things, Skip, that we might be joking around, but if somebody else heard it and all they heard was you say that, they automatically assumed it. Man, did you hear what he said?
Or if there are people there who have an axe to grind, who are jealous of him, a la Horace Grant, and figure this could be a way to get Michael Jordan in trouble. I can run back and go tell Sam Smith about it and blow it out of proportion. You have to be very careful who you divulge information to, who you joke around with. You have a lot of people who are trying to act like they're your buddies, your friends, and all these other things, and they're really trying to sow the seed of your downfall. Be very careful.
They got back. It was. But Skip, like he said, I didn't get in this to be activism, and that was not his calling. Skip, I like that.
Just like it wasn't your calling, Shannon Sharpe. I watched your whole career, and you were not an activist while you were a football player. But now that you're on TV, you're trying to act super woke. None of you guys back in the 1990s were talking that race shit. None of you, other than Charles Barkley and Barry Bonds, and that was only when the both of them got upset. None of you guys were talking that race shit. Not Isaiah Thomas, not Magic Johnson. None of you. So it's hilarious to me that all you guys try to point the finger at Michael Jordan. That's how you know it's out of jealousy.
Michael said, I was just wanting to be a basketball player. But Skip, the most touching, last night when he said, Skip, if he had a chance to do it over again, I'm not so sure I would want to do this. I don't know if I would want to be a role model because I'm already set up for failure.
The reason why he said that is because he came to understand that he was playing a role for corporations, and he was trying to appease people and make them like him, to make himself more appealing. And he realized that it was all for naught because people were still going to try to come against him anyway. So that was Michael Jordan regretting the character that he had allowed himself to be assigned.
Skip, that broke my heart. This is the most popular man maybe ever. Maybe only Ali and Tiger can rival him.
Tiger Woods cannot rival him, bro. The only person who can rival Jordan is Ali, as far as global popularity.
And he says, I don't know, man. He says, I don't know. Wow. Let that sink in. Let that sink and skip. Here he is, Michael Jordan at the apex, the crescendo. And he says, I don't know, man. He says, because
the crescendo, the pinnacle, Skip Bayless. Now it's LeBron.
Is it worth it?
Are you finished?
I'm finished.
Hey, Skip Bayless be so annoyed. Whenever Shannon try to talk about Michael Jordan, Skip Bayless just sits back pissed off. Like, when is this nigga going to finish? He doesn't understand Michael at all.
Skip.
Okay, all right. Let's get back to Jenny's initial question about how much did gambling have to do with the almost 2 years that he suddenly, shockingly took off in the heart of his prime at ages 30 and 31. Again, I worked in Chicago in 1998. I was there for The Last Dance as the lead columnist of the Chicago Tribune. I saw it from the inside out. I heard all the stories. Sam Smith was a teammate of mine for those years I was in Chicago. And what I continued to hear from people on the inside, and this is in 1998, and by the way, the interview you talked about where he's sitting on his couch with his cigar, that's in a hotel room in 1998. 98. We're talking about 93. After the first three-peat, he suddenly walked away from basketball. How much did gambling have to do with that? I say everything. You could argue.
You say everything, Skip Bayless, but you're supposed to be a journalist. Do you have any real empirical evidence or data to back up what you're claiming?
That he was getting burned out, as he indicated there in the documentary at that point.
Right.
You can argue that he got burned out from all the negative publicity that ensued after all of his gambling was revealed. But that wasn't from Sam Smith. That wasn't about the Jordan rules. That was just about going to Atlantic City after the first two losses to the Knicks and taking.
And that was a huge story at the time. They blew that story up so much after they lost Game 2. The Bulls lost Game 2 in Madison Square Garden, and Jordan and his father and some other people in, his retinue decided to go to Atlantic City to gamble and loosen up. And the New York Post and the New York Daily News blew it so out of proportion. Why is that? Because they were trying to harp on it to break down Jordan mentally to help the Knicks win. That's how the media was back then. It wasn't a bunch of different media outlets rooting for one person like how the media outlets root for LeBron James now. Back then, each team was like a gang. I've mentioned this before. The Houston gang was led by Olajuwon. The Chicago gang was led by Jordan. The Detroit gang was led by Isaiah Thomas. The New York gang was led by Patrick Ewing. And the New York media was desperate to help the Knicks in any way they could. So they were going to harp on Jordan going to Atlantic City, hoping that it might cause some dissension amongst the team. And it almost did.
A public beating for that. And as Michael said, he got asked by the league office about that. And his answer was, well, it's legal to go to a casino. I like to play blackjack. And then the book came out, that Richard Esquinas book, Michael and Me, and he alleged in the book, Esquinas did, he's like a professional sort of hustler gambler, that Michael had lost $1.25 million to him on the golf course. This was in 1993.
Esquinas is another character associated with Michael Jordan, and now, interestingly enough, Esquinas is involved in certain forms of esotericism and transcendental meditation techniques. So who knows who Esquinas actually is? He could just be a character who was meant to draw out some of the personality alters within Jordan involving gambling.
When that was a whole lot of money, and that was a bad look for the league, and it led to questions about, gee, if Michael is gambling so heavily off the course, then what about the people he's associating with, which led to his association with this slim bowler?
Well, the real thing that the league was worried about was that Jordan may have been betting on himself and on the Bulls. That was the real issue, and that's what Stern was concerned with. And whether or not they actually found any evidence of that, who knows? There are some people who say that Stern found evidence that both Magic Johnson and Jordan were betting on themselves in basketball games. There are other people who say no, there was never any findings of that sort or of that nature. It is what it is. We'll probably never truly know, at least not until Jordan and Magic Johnson are deceased. And maybe when this society is in certain levels of upheavals, the truth tends to come out. Do I think that Jordan was betting on himself? I wouldn't doubt it. Do I think that he ever bet against himself? No, I don't think so. But I do think that he would bet on himself in basketball games. I have very little doubt about that. Of course, I have no proof.
Another criminal, convicted criminal, that he was playing golf with regularly, and it was not reported whether he lost or won money. It was just the association with Slim Bowler. Not a good look for the league. And again, David Stern, very unhappy with that image, right? So all this was the fallout. Yeah.
He did lose, remember, because there was a $57,000 check when the feds went looking at Slim Bowler.
He did.
He said it was a loan.
Yeah, he said
and then they finally called him to court. Right, and then he finally came to court, and he actually had to say what it was for. It was a gambling debt I had lost, and I had to pay it off.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So it looked a little shady that you're losing.
Well, another shady aspect is that Jordan was known for not paying back his debts. So, every once in a while he would run into different characters, and he would have to be told, look, this is not somebody to play with.
Money to professional gamblers, which could indicate you could get yourself in a bind when they came back to you and said, hey, if you'd shave a few points tonight, I'll relieve your debt. I'll forgive your debt, right? You don't have to pay me back. If you'll just make sure, bring in the game under 10 points tonight, which is the point spread, then we're good. We're even if you can do that for me. And that was the speculation of the time. Gee, would Michael be, could he possibly fall prey to that? Could he be susceptible to that kind of thinking? And nothing was ever proven. Nothing was ever even alleged about that. But that was the league's fear at that point.
Right.
And Michael got sick and tired of having to answer questions about it. So even going into those finals, remember, he did that sit down that he requested with Ahmad Rashad, who was probably his best friend in the world. Ahmad Rashad obviously played your game, played pro football for a while. And
well, Ahmad's job was to play the role of Michael Jordan's liaison on NBC. Please keep in mind that Ahmad Rashad was also, quote-unquote, close friends with O.J. Simpson. So who Ahmad Rashad or what Ahmad Rashad actually is, who knows? But we do know that he has very close connections with two very highly strategically placed Monarch athletes in the industry.
Michael really loved him and sort of honored him. Yes, he was Bob.
And of course, Ahmad also had connections to Bill Cosby as well through Phylicia Rashad.
Be more for a while, then he was Ahmad Rashad, if you remember. So, right. So the point was that he did a sit down with Ahmad before the finals started against Barkley's Phoenix Suns. And he wanted to answer all the gambling questions one more time. And Ahmad said in the documentary, well, he did wear sunglasses, which Ahmad didn't love because it looked like he was trying to hide his eyes behind the sunglasses. So the point...
That was a Masonic ritual. The wearing of sunglasses in interviews behind closed doors is meant to imply that they're being placed through a ritual or a certain process of elevation, which Jordan was at the time. Once again, that is why in the third finals they played against the Phoenix Suns. That was meant to imply that Jordan was going through a ritualistic rebirth. Phoenix, of course, is not only meant to denote the bird that was reborn, the mythological bird symbolizing rejuvenation or reincarnation or rebirth, and also Horus or Heru, but it's also an abbreviation for the Phoenicians or the Canaanites, whose religion is the official quote-unquote religion of the world today.
Point was, what I always heard in my year in Chicago around the 98 Bulls was that it had a lot to do with gambling, that even the appearance of it got so bad that David Stern, who has denied this repeatedly, even in the documentary, David Stern said it never reached epic crisis levels, his gambling. I just think it was so bad image-wise that he encouraged Michael to step away.
No, David Stern did not encourage Jordan to step away. David Stern just understood the script for Jordan. He knew what the script was. Or at least I believe he was made privy to the script around the time of Jordan's third championship. Because the league struggled so much in the aftermath of Jordan's initial retirement, especially trying to find a replacement when it came to potential champions, they had to try to build up the Orlando Magic on the fly, allowing Orlando to draft Penny Hardaway, trying to rush them into the finals, so on and so forth. But please keep in mind that David Stern was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, just as Adam Silver is today. He was a proponent of globalism. He was a pawn of the globalists, which is why he was involved in the quote-unquote dream team, because basketball is used as a tool for globalism. And David Stern is also a high-level Kabbalist, of course. He's a so-called Caucasian Jew. So in my view, he must have been privy to Jordan's overall script. And he knew that the gambling would be used as a plot point, at least to substantiate why Jordan was not going to be in the NBA for a moment.
And maybe Michael was burned out. Maybe he needed to recharge his engine a little bit by going to try to play baseball. But
yes, he needed to be reborn. Hence, they played the Phoenix Suns. He scores 33 points in Game 6 and ends that playoff run with 666 points. And he takes down the incumbent, the divine jokester, Charles Barkley.
But suddenly, he's playing Double-A baseball at age 30 in the heart of his prime. To this day, I can't wrap my head around it that he just decided to take a long break from basketball that was almost 2 years. Because remember, he only played 17 games 2 years later. He came back in later March. And they were, at one point in March, the Bulls were 31-31. So they were really struggling 2 years after. And he finally came back just in time to sort of get ready for those playoffs when they finally lost to the Magic, as you recall. But he gave up 2 prime years of his career, one to play baseball, and again, he hit .202 for the Birmingham Bulls, who happened to be part of the White Sox, owned by his Bulls owner, Jerry Reinsdorf. But he hit .202, he hit
I think they were the Birmingham Barons, unless he played for another franchise that I'm not aware of.
3 home runs, and that's in 436 at-bats. He did drive in 51 runs, which is not bad. He stole 30 bases.
Skip Bayless, for someone to hit .202, and they've basically not played any organized baseball in 20 years, that was extraordinary. To hit .202, as Terry Francona stated, there were top prospects who did not hit .202 in Double-A baseball that year.
Bases, which is not bad, but again, was he a baseball player? No, he wasn't a baseball player. He was good enough to be respectable at Double-A, but that's all. And
as hard as Michael Jordan worked, had he stuck with baseball and worked at it with the same level of tenacity as he worked at basketball, or worked at baseball during his respite from basketball, he would have been a star baseball player.
The point was, Shannon, the Michael I got to know in Chicago, his fire raged so hot that he just couldn't stop competing. He said, I have a competition problem, not a gambling problem.
Correct. Yes.
He wanted to gamble at everything, especially golf.
Yes.
And again, I've walked with Michael during rounds.
Listen to Shannon. Yeah, that's why that nigga stole my girlfriend back in 1994, Skip Bayless. I've never mentioned this, but this is why I hate that nigga so much. He wants to compete at every damn thing. The nigga walked into the bar. He told me, I bet you I could take your bitch. And I said, no way. Next thing I know, he's walking out with her. Michael Jordan, if you're watching this show, fuck you.
Of golf, trust me on this. He's very good, but he's not great. He's not going. He never had any shot at playing professional golf. He looked like he could shoot 75 or 78 to me. You know, he'd be like a 5 or 6 handicap. Yeah, I know. But he was. On a good day. He could have his moments. I'm sure playing for a lot of money, maybe occasionally he could shoot par. But in general, he was just a pretty good golfer. But I've always told you, and I'm sure your big brother's told you, golf is the hardest game in the world to play. There's nothing.
That's why so many athletes become obsessed with it. because you can never conquer the golf course. Jordan himself even stated that, I believe it was on his first highlight tape, "Come Fly With Me," what has drawn him or kept him captivated within the game of golf is the fact that you can never conquer the course. Golf, by the way, was invented by the original Scotsman who was so-called black men.
Nothing like the challenge of golf, because the ball doesn't move until you move. You don't pass the ball, you don't catch the ball. There's no reacting like catch and shoot it. You have to think it all through before it even happens. You can't play defense. You can't say, well, he was just better than me today because I couldn't guard him. It's such a hard game, and it comes and it goes and it comes and it goes. So he got addicted to gambling at golf, and then he got addicted to gambling at cards, and he got addicted to gambling, as you saw in the documentary, with his security guy. What was his name? John.
I'm not going to necessarily say that Jordan became addicted to it. I think an addiction normally implies that you lack control when it comes to your finances. When you look at most of Jordan's bets, it was like he was betting a couple $100. He was betting his security guards $20, things of that nature. And he would always impair himself to give, his competition the edge, especially if they were his security. So he really just wanted to challenge himself while putting his competition in position to win. That's how you knew that he cared about, the people that he was competing against, at least his security. Because it was never like, I'm Michael Jordan, the best athlete in the world, and I'm going to go head to head against this 55-year-old security guard and take his money. It was never necessarily about that, but I don't consider him as having an addiction, because an addiction is when you have $100,000 in your bank account, but you're betting $150,000. It never went that far with Jordan.
Michael Wozniak, he passed away last January, Michael Wozniak, but the point was they're flipping quarters against the wall, and we saw Jordan lose at that. And I think he lost a lot at flipping quarters, golf, and cards. Yes. He never lost at basketball when it mattered, but when it came to those games, I think his addiction started getting to him where he couldn't stop, and then he couldn't stop losing, and he would double down and triple down. And the point was, he was still playing at a supremely high level in basketball. Because I remind you, Shannon, despite all the controversy from the gambling, guess what he did against Barkley's Suns in that 93 finals?
He averaged 41,
9 rebounds, and 6 assists. 41, 9, and 6.
And shot well over 50%. That's the real point.
Wow. Well, that's tremendous. You could argue it was the best numbers he ever put up in a finals. And then
Well, in my view, his best overall finals was the first one against the Lakers, because I think that was when he was the most proficient, efficient, and he was delegating. I mean, he was playing perfect basketball. Perfect basketball. Against the Portland Trail Blazers, he had a vendetta against Clyde. So he had some outstanding moments, but there were other games where he did not play particularly that well. I don't think that he played that well in games 3 or 4 against Portland. But he had outstanding games in games 1 and 5, and he was pretty good down the stretch of game 6, even though that was mostly his supporting cast that brought the Bulls back. Now, in the third finals against Phoenix, he was just out there lighting everybody up. Phoenix's defense left a bit to be desired, and I think that Jordan felt some relief after going against that hard-nosed defense with the Knicks to finally face a team where he can get some open looks.
You're telling me he's just going to walk away from that? He's going to effectively just quit basketball for a while? I don't buy it. I think there is something operating much deeper than that. I don't think we're going to get to it in the documentary because obviously it's...
Well, I can help you out, Skip, but you have to watch my 3-dimensional breakdown of The Last Dance. But it's good that you're asking certain questions. I have to wonder how much of this is sincere and how much of it is just you know, just playing coy on national TV. At the end of the day, you have to know a little bit for you to have attained this level of fame and celebrity in the entertainment industry.
Michael's documentary, he's got editorial control over it. So, no, he's not going to go there. But I appreciated the fact that they touched all the right bases on the gambling. They didn't run from it. They didn't ignore it. Right. They laid it out there for you, and then you draw your own conclusions. And mine is that gambling did play some big part in him being forced, or at least encouraged, to take a sabbatical after the 93 season?
No, Skip, it was Kabbalistic, man. That's what it was about. Jordan was to win 3 championships, at least that's how it was scripted. He played the role of the divine bull. He would be ritualistically sacrificed or shamed, quote unquote, into retirement. It was a shaming ritual to expose his quote unquote gambling and then to remove his father. He was playing the role of Heru. His father, of course, is Asar or Osiris. So Horus had to undergo his training, his humbling, and be rejuvenated and come back and seek vengeance for the demise of his father. And that's the reason why in his first comeback against the Seattle Supersonics, he defeated them. And of course, he was able to cement the title on Father's Day. That was for Asar or Osiris, which is what Father's Day is for, by the way.
Skip, the thing is for what golf and what my brother's teaching me has taught me about the game of golf is that, and he plays it all the time. He's hitting, he's chipping, he's putting, he's doing all these things. He said the difference between golf and other sports, you get to play against the guy. He said, but in golf, you play against the course. And see, that's what Michael Jordan was a foul, Skip. He's like, when Charles Barkley won the MVP, he said, okay, you gave him that, I'm about to get this. I can play against you, Charles. You're not playing against the basketball court. You're playing against Charles Barkley. Okay, you gave Mailman my MVP. I'm playing against him. I'm going to get it back. You see, Skip, the thing is, like when you go to Vegas, you have a winning hand. Vegas knows that they can just keep you there long enough, the tide will swing, and they'll get all they lost back to you and all you brought in. They'll get all of it back. And that's what happened to Jordan, Skip. He was starting to lose at quarters, and he just couldn't walk away, Skip. He's like, okay, well, I give you.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. He had that white man with the curly afro just beating him at quarters, man. Got Michael looking in the camera confounded. And the security guard mocked him, did the shrug.
4 cracks to beat my one. He just can't help it. Skip, 4 quarters of the game that I played in 4-8, we played as kids, pitching pennies, pitching nickels, closest to the wall to win. That's how competitive he was, Skip. As an athlete, I think it was Will Perdue was telling the story. Now, the big dogs were in the back of the plane. They're probably playing Guts or Boo Ray, and people at home, hopefully you know what that is. I don't have time to explain it to you. He said, but he and B.J. Armstrong and John Paxton, they're playing up front, and they're playing blackjack for $1 hand. And Michael comes up there and says, well, can I play? And Pax asks him, like, well, Michael, why would you want to play with us? He says, because I want your money in my pocket. You see, Skip, and I tell you all the time, when you're...
There's a story where Jordan was playing Horace Grant in ping pong. And I believe that he was able to defeat Horace Grant in ping pong. And he made Horace Grant leave the practice facility to go get his money because they had bet a certain amount of money that Jordan was going to win in ping pong, or who was going to win in ping pong, I should say. And when Jordan won, due to the fact that Horace Grant did not have the amount of money on him that they bet, he made Horace go back to wherever it was, the hotel or what have you, to go get his money. And Horace was like, damn, Mike, why you making me do all this? And Michael Jordan said, because this is my trophy. And he held up the money that Horace gave him. He said, this is my trophy right here.
You're an athlete, Skip. We make money. You don't really gamble to try to make money. I didn't want the guys' money because everybody was making money. I wanted their pride. I wanted you to go to the bank and get me $10,000 worth of nickels. And when they ask you, why are you getting $10,000 worth of nickels, I wanted you to say, because I lost the bet to Shannon Sharpe. That's what Michael wanted.
See, the thing with Shannon is that he's so much like Michael that he's repelled by Michael. Michael is so much like Shannon Sharpe that it bothers Shannon. The reason why Shannon loves LeBron so much is because, number one, he believes that he can build his name in the media off of LeBron James, kind of by being contrary to what everyone else says. And on top of that, he's caught up in LeBron's woke bullshit. I also think that he's kind of a fanboy of LeBron as a super stud athlete with the physique and all that, because most of the guys who are caught up in LeBron are also caught up in Cam Newton. People like Marcellus Wiley and Shannon, etc.
Yeah, what do you want with $1 from John Paxson or B.J. Armstrong? He wanted the fact that they knew that he knew he had took $1 from them. That's what it meant to him.
Okay, so the fire that raged in him on the basketball court and took him to heights we've never, ever seen before on the basketball court, could get him in trouble off the court in games he wasn't great at. That's what started happening, because his basketball got greater and greater. And we saw the Dream Team story of that one practice game that they played, an intra-squad game, in which it started getting hot and heavy, and it was Magic and Bird on one side and Jordan on the other, and Magic starts trash-talking Michael, and they're up 8, he said, Magic said, and all of a sudden he's challenging Michael more and more, saying, we're going to run you out of the gym if you don't start playing like Jordan, like Mike. And all of a sudden he did, and he took the game over, and they'd never seen anything like it. And all those players have said that was the greatest basketball contest any had been a part of, because it's all the greatest players ever on the same court at the same time. Well, Michael could dominate that.
And all grown men, too. Between the ages of around 28 to 35, nobody would have ever beaten that team. The basketball IQ was too high. The skill sets were too high. Way too high. People talk about the Redeem Team. Well, actually, the 2012 Dream Team was better than the 2008 Dream Team, because at least that team in 2012 had players who were more weathered and more experienced in winning championships. You had up-and-coming players like Durant and Westbrook on that team. You had Chris Paul on that squad. But still, the Dream Team would have been just way too much for any of those other teams. Way too much.
That's basketball. He could dominate that, and if you wanted to play for money, he'd play you for money there. But once he started playing golf for money with professional gamblers, I believe he did get into some trouble. And I do believe that in the end, it cost him a couple of years. And I'm going to throw one last point at you, Shane.
Right, but Skip, you just can't come on TV and say that. You have to have something to back it up. You're supposed to be a real reporter. Now, me, I'm on the outside looking in, so I have to put certain things together, and then also based on my understanding of this three-dimensional world and what actually galvanizes the entertainment industry. But you're supposed to be a reporter, man. You're supposed to say, here are my sources and here's why I say that. You don't have to name names, but you're just speculating, bro. You just say, hey, fucking thing.
And remember, he did lose his father. His father was murdered on...
Now you're getting somewhere. The father was the main thing, because this was a Horus ritual, with his father playing the role of Osiris or Asar. This was meant to trigger Jordan as Horus or Heru. That's how the narrative, basically was stretched out.
On July 23rd of 1993, so after that Phoenix Finals, 41-9-6, soon after, James, his father, the story was that he was driving the car, the Lexus that Michael had bought him, and it had license plates of UNC 0023, and a couple of kids are behind him on the highway. He pulls over to take a nap. This is the story.
Now, please keep in mind that when you hear Skip Bayless rattle off the license plate number of UNC 0023, that has a twofold understanding. Not only does that represent the University of North Carolina and Michael Jordan's number, but that's also UNC 23. UNC is an abbreviation for uncle, and the word uncle means master. The number 23, as we all know, is for the quote-unquote spiraling DNA, or the spiraling serpents. So the master is the serpent, or the master is the engineered one, or the hidden god per se. Talking about who? Asar or Osiris. That was the role that James Jordan played in this whole Michael Jordan narrative. But once again, I'll be explaining that in further or greater detail in the three-dimensional version of this Michael Jordan story.
And they intended just to steal the car, and they wound up pulling the trigger on him and killing him. That
most likely a couple of patsies.
That's the story. It was a very controversial trial. Both went to prison for life. The two teenagers did. I don't know what happened. There's a lot of speculation that there was a deeper story that was going on there. So maybe that played into it. Maybe Michael needed to, obviously, to grieve the loss of the father that was so close to him. But a lot of things were operating under the surface there for Michael when he finally said, okay, I'm going to Birmingham to play baseball for the Bulls, the Birmingham Bulls.
It was the Barons, Skip. I think it was the Barons. I think it's the Durham Bulls and the Birmingham Barons. But Skip, the Barons. Skip, I think what happened, to try to make this quick, Skip, I think what Michael did is that you bringing people to gamble. That's money I can get. Well, I don't care who they are, what they do. Skip, I don't believe Michael Jordan asked who they were. They had money. He wanted to take it.
That's the point. He didn't really care. And that's pretty much the environment that he grew up around. Down in North Carolina, Virginia, my father's family's from there. That's pretty much all they do. They gonna gamble. They gonna smoke. They gonna talk shit. They gonna barbecue. That's how life is down there.
Skip, if you notice, that's how drug people get brought down. They have a specific group that they sell to, and it's always the one, oh man, he good, somebody vouches for him, and it be an informant. He gets inside, he ends up toppling the whole thing, and that's kind of probably what happened.
Well, that, and they also normally get taken down through taxes. That's if they're not smart enough to open up businesses to launder the money.
Those guys had money on the golf course. Michael's like, oh, you got money? You got 50, 100K? Okay, let's go. He wasn't even thinking, man, hey, bro, what you do? Why you got that kind of money? But that's not what he did. He didn't check, and then that's what happened.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. That's my review for episodes 5 and 6 of Michael Jordan's docuseries The Last Dance. So peace.